Perfect.
Okay, so for those of you that haven't heard my preamble, welcome to the How Important Is It to See a Stride webinar with the one and only Lucinda Green. My name is Rachel. I am going to pass you over to Lucinda, and we've got so many people on, which is wonderful, and enjoy, everybody. I'm going to disappear. Well, I'm going to try. I'm going to spotlight you for everybody. Right. As always, smooth and slick. There we go.
Right. And you pressed record. I'm sort of vaguely in the middle of the screen. I find it awfully difficult to get in the right place. And I am absolutely thrilled that we've got this opportunity to discuss this subject. It's one of several subjects that are really, really close to my heart because I believe they are so vital, the various things that I love to chat about. We're just going to deal with this one this time, although it might lead into two or three of the others. And it is a discussion. You're going to have me spouting off for a bit just to sort of get things moving. And then by then, we hope that you will have written in some suggestions or some questions. And don't worry how stupid your question may seem to you. Don't be embarrassed, because that can often give rise to something really interesting. So just whack it on. And Rachel won't be able to take all of them, but she'll try and take the ones that have the most. I don't know how you're going to do the thumbs up, but you want to hear the answer to that one. So I'm going to take you back, because I am a little bit older than some of you. I'm going to take you back quite a long way to '02, I would say, when I started, and I'm not going to spend long here because we're about today, we're very current. But I had no eye for a stride, and my wonderful South African trainer, whose name was Pat Burgess, who came with her English vet husband over from South Africa, with an extraordinary ability to teach. And she hadn't ever taught anybody very smart. We found her in the pony club, age 14. My father said to her, "Oh, Mrs. Burgess, you're a wonderful teacher. Would you take Lucinda on?" To which she said no. And he was a bit horrified because this is such a kind, wonderful woman. She'd never say no to anybody. And he said, "Why not?" And she simply said, "Because she won't listen." And anyhow, thank goodness, that didn't last. And she was probably, along with several other incredibly valuable people, the mainstay of what I learned. She saw straight away that I had no natural eye for a stride. Now, some people have, wonderful. And if you haven't, you've got to find another way. And I remember so well her saying, all you've got to do is medium length canter and plug in. And the plug in was your seat must be in the saddle, and thinking a little bit of dressage seat to bring it up to date. Pat wouldn't have known what a dressage seat was because it wasn't her thing. She was a show jumper in South Africa. But those were the two things she said: medium length stride and plug in. And I never remember having any trouble seeing a stride, not seeing a stride. It just was not a feature. And it was not a feature of really the first, I suppose, I sort of hit the ground running in 1972 at badminton, when I did something which I'll never do again and wore leather gloves. And when a horse gets a very sweaty neck, leather slips, and turning from one Tom Smith's walls to the other, the reins just went straight through my hands and I had a run out. And he would have won, be fair, he would have won that 1972 Olympic year badminton if I had known not to wear leather gloves. So there's one for the books. But really all through that period of time, 70s and 80s, when we were riding at high level, World Championships, Olympic Games, 84, 76, Montreal, you know, this goes back so much further than any of you, but believe me, they were extremely big, the cross-country courses in those days, because there wasn't the same problem that there is now with how people view things. And I don't remember the stride issue ever coming up. We were very, very adamant about walking the striding between fences, 2, 3, maybe 4. But we never really had to worry about getting the right spot. It sort of happened. And I'm sure many of my contemporaries had, and I can tell you two that did, Mark Phillips and Ian Stark, had a much better natural eye for a stride and would use that eye. But I, and I'm sure many others, didn't. So we found a way. And our way was that medium length stride, that making sure his mind was with us and on the job we wanted to do, and you had the power in your canter. And then you had to learn, which you did over time, how to get a really small canter for coffins so that they could really be nimble and pop, 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 and a much bigger canter for your phase B, your steeplechase, and various gears in between. But fundamentally, your horse had an engine. He was taking you to the fence, even if it was only on a small stride for the coffin or for a combination or whatever, which would be a little bit bigger stride, more like a show jumping stride. And then I've thought about this so much, because what happened between those 2 decades and the 90s and now? And at the very beginning of 90s, a wonderful young lad called Richard Adams, who was a pupil with me for a little bit of time, but only a few weeks, that's why I happened to know him. And he upended at a table at Windsor, and that was the end. That was the first, I think, first fatality. And quite a few tables, because they were built very flat and on solid sleeper legs, had caused a few nasty falls. And so they decreed that tables must always have a slope to them, etc., etc. But the awful thing is that almost triggered the phenomenon of we must be on the right stride, because otherwise it could happen to us. And then we had the most amazing horsemen like Mark Todd, who probably takes the biscuit in my view for being the best rider in the world. I think he would tell you now that Michael Young was better than him, but that's evolution, isn't it? And he had a phenomenal eye for a stride. And as you may remember, he show jumped in the Seoul Olympics as well, not on the same horse, as well as winning second of his gold individual medals for eventing. Had a phenomenal eye for a stride. So a little bit word started to go down about seeing strides. Mark also rode in a slightly forward seat. But, and this is the big but, there was no man in the world quicker to get back where he needed to be in behind the action when things went wrong. The rest of us mere mortals needed to get into that position before it went wrong, because we wouldn't have time and react quick enough to do it as it went wrong. But time and again, I'd see Mark Phillips coming into his fence in that soft, light seat, and things went on, boom, he was where he needed to be. So those 2 things are a little bit combined, the eye for a stride, the lighter body, and this is not a really nice way to start a webinar, but the hideous fatalities mounted up. And there's an awful lot of reasons other than seeing a stride and missing it out. There's a lot of reasons, like the structure of the fences became way, way stronger. The course designer's income now depended on him not having a broken fence, otherwise he wouldn't get asked back next time. And now course designers were becoming, it was their annual income to build. So they started to go very, very much deeper into the ground, the upright. So there was no natural frangibility, which there was certainly in the 70s and 80s. So there was a sort of natural give. The post hole digger came in, I think, somewhere around the later 80s. So they could go in much deeper, and they became much more rigid, which inevitably allows that rotation, which is what we never saw. We never saw rotation. I think I remember seeing one badminton in the later 70s. I can even remember who it was, but you just didn't see that sort of fall. And believe me, much more than now, because now everybody's so much more sensitive about animals being used in sport and not having a choice. But you that know horses know full well, if a horse doesn't want to go, he ain't going. And we saw that in the Olympics once or twice in the show jumping. So this sort of thing came in that the fences didn't give at all, and they certainly did give when I started. I mean, you could see, but we never thought about it. But the upright was in, hand dug maybe a foot, it just gave a little bit, and that stopped the rotation. So I think that's how what we have today built up, and I think it's important to understand the history of it. And I could go on forever about horses falling and why they do and why they don't. And that's another whole webinar that would be fun, and I mean interesting as opposed to fun to do. But I really want to settle on to the subject in mind here. And to try and find a way through something, you need to look back at the history. And it is a very true thing that was said by many great statesmen, that history is cyclical. So what we've got now is pretty worldwide, very, very good, what I call ready for trouble seats in those last few strides. Most people are in their dressage seat. Few people still a little forward, but usually when there's a difficult combination or something trappy, they're in their ready for trouble position. But more and more now I hear striding. And just today, I was listening to a friend's video, and her dad had taken the video, and it was so indicative of where we are today, which was, oh, she put in another one there. Oh, she took one out there. In other words, he'd walked the course with her, he had counted the strides, and it wasn't going as they had counted. Then eventually she ran out, and there was the voice over the video was, oh, she put in one too many there, and ran out. And I thought, oh, geez, this is what you hear all over the place. You hear people having walked the course and having decided that it was going to be this stride, and then riding for this stride. Now remember, the horse has never seen the fence. You've walked it, you know exactly what it is, you know exactly the colors of the advertising boards that could be shading the fence from the horse, and he's not quite able to define the fence. You know exactly where the sun is, because before you've started, you've had a look round because the sun is low, it's getting late, or it's early and it's getting low. And you've worked out in your mind which fences are working into the sun. Can I jump those at an angle so I'm not going into the sun, so my horse will have longer to see it? No, I can't that one because there's a skinny after it, so now I've got to go slower and give him longer to focus on this fence that has the sun straight into his eye. So I've gone through all those possibilities of things that can go wrong, and I set out. But I want my horse to see that fence early. I want him to take me to it. I must have that desire. If he hasn't got desire to take me to it, I'm going to end up in trouble because I won't have my engine. So I'm going to make sure of those two things: early view, desire to take me to it. Then my job, because I've walked the course, is to regulate that desire to the speed I think is right for him, to give him time to read it. If it's one of those difficult ones, or it's into the sun, or there's colors molding into the background or whatever, give him time to read it, but make sure his engine is right there as he has time to read it. Then he will pick up his stride. He will find where to take off. He might get very deep and I might have to sit back a little further, but keep my legs on because I must keep his hind legs moving so he doesn't just stop. He will work it out. And one of the main phrases that I say when I'm starting to train a horse and a rider, and I say it to myself all the time, my ambition is a paradox. And the paradox is a double opposite. I want him to think for himself. He's very, very capable of thinking for himself. He's a survivor. He survived millennia of lions jumping out of trees on him, which is why horses are so frightened when they can't see something up above them. I want him to think for himself, and I want him to listen to me. And that's a complete double opposite. That's a complete juxtaposition of two opposing requirements. And that's what I want to train him to understand. He can use his initiative. He can get me out of any spot. He can work out what stride he wants, but he has to listen to me because he doesn't know the line. He doesn't know the speed to come to the fence. He knows none of that. I know that. So it's my job to give him the direction and the right amount of engine power. But first of all, he's got to see it. And in the old days, we never thought about had our horse seen a fence because they were all 12 foot wide, damn terrifying, a lot of them. But it was just whether your horse was brave enough to come down to the fence, not whether he'd seen it. So now we have to add this. Sorry. Now we have to add this thing of has the horse seen the fence, because the only way to create a cross-country course that has some consequence is to give a horse an opportunity to run out, because we don't want to give a horse an opportunity to fall, or before we know it, there won't be any eventing anymore. So we understand that. It's that paradox that I brought him up with, which is why I feel completely happy to go down to a big fence. Quite honestly, the bigger the better. I don't know how to actually stop this iPhone, which is on silent, from coming through. I'm so sorry. This is a time of year, time of night when people ring. I'll try and hope that they don't. With my feeling that he's had this all the way through his early life, thinking for himself but listening to me, I'm happy for him to come down to a fence and find his stride. I'm happy if I know what the distance is between two parts, and it might be 2, it might be 3, it might be 4, and I'm going to clock that, and that will help me understand what sort of pace I need to approach the fence at, because if it's a long 2, I might come in a little bit stronger. But as soon as I'm in over that first one, I'm going to sit up and put my legs on, and now I'm going to feel, gosh, do I need to hold him together to put in an extra one, or do I need to ride him out? And that takes a little bit of experience for sure. But as Lissa said to me when I talked to her about this, to say, you know, what sort of thing would you say? She said, you know, it really annoys me that people don't understand that a horse is so athletic and so amenable. And those were 2 A's that I'm going to incorporate in my teaching, because I thought they were so good, so amenable and so athletic, that if he needs to put in another stride, he can do it. It's not a problem, so long as I've got my ready for trouble seat and I'm not pulling his face off. So long as I don't drop him, but I just keep that contact that allows him to take his neck and head down. If he needs to struggle a bit, doesn't matter. But I was quite interested listening to her, because she was quite cross. She said, I just don't know why people get so angry. What does it matter if they put in an extra stride? It doesn't matter. So long as you're out of the way, horse will get you out of it. Horses have an incredible instinct of self-preservation. And I said it earlier, that's why they're still here. They've learned to run away from the animals of prey. And that's why they have this extraordinary vision. So when they're down grazing, they can see all around them. I'm told that they can see when their head is up 350 degrees, and the only blind spot is right under their nose and right behind their tail, which is why you're very careful how you approach a horse if you're approaching him from the back, and he may not know you're there. And I've done that once, and I don't know how I missed breaking my hip. Bang, because that is a blind spot, and they feel something there and they'll kick at it. So a horse has this extraordinary vision. He's well able to judge where he is. And it's, in my view, it's up to us to understand what a brilliant animal the horse is. And provided we've done our job, and I will just give you a quick acronym. Our job is elbow. Those are 3 jobs, ELB. We're in charge of the engine, the line, has he seen it, and the balance. Are we plugged in, ready for trouble? And then the OW is ow, if we forgot one of them. So if we've done our jobs, my horse, his responsibility is to find a spot and take off. I must do my job. He cannot, my 3 jobs, he cannot do it without that. And it's interesting, because this day and age, people do feel you've got to see a stride, and they get quite cross with me and sort of rub me out, because they say, oh, you're just a natural. You just don't know how you've just got a natural eye. You always put the horse in the right place. Well, actually, I don't think I do anymore, because I think I've lost a certain amount of my ability. I think you do as you creep up a bit, especially if you don't do it a lot, which I don't now. But I never used to. I might have developed an eye, and I think I have over the last however many decades it is, but I never used to. And my horses, 6 of them, and some of them had not had great experiences before they came to be ridden by me, won Badminton. And they won Badminton because they absolutely trusted me. I didn't tell them what to do. They worked it out for themselves. But my golly, I was fit, because I had a lot of work to keep those horses in the balance and in the pace that they needed to be for the fence, and on the line and not deviating. So I was a very important part. But the reason I think so many horses were good enough to me was because they felt completely safe. They weren't going to be told what to do in that last second when you suddenly panic, see a stride and pull. Equally, they weren't going to be dropped. They're going to be kept in that balance all the way through. And it's an interesting one, because obviously people nowadays who aren't old enough to have seen what happened in the older days don't have anything to compare it against, and I do. And I have a real ally in Chris Bartle, who I feel is one of the great cross-country trainers in the world. And all he says is quality of canter. If you've got quality of canter, your horse has options. He can put in, he can stand off, he can do whatever he needs to do. And he and I are completely on the same wavelength of this. But he said to me, having been with the Germans for 15 years and got them to win just about every medal there was after them having not won very many, he said, but the top guys, they will always know their stride. They'll always walk their distance. They'll always know their stride. And to me, that is where the problem has come, because they do. The top guys are so tuned in that they can do that. But those of us that are not so good as them, and that's really the rest of us, we don't want to try and do what they do. And I'm going to take you to long jump, where I don't know what it's like now, but when Lissa was doing long jump at school, she got to county standard and she loved it. She said, Mum, we never counted the distance from where we started to the line until X years on, we got to county standard. Then we counted the yards and how many running strides we were going to do before we hit the line and did the long jump. And that beautifully encapsulates where I feel we should be as riders, not trying to do what the best can do, because we aren't yet the best. Concentrating on giving our horses a chance to think for themselves, making sure we're doing our 3 jobs, and the balance is a very important one, the plugged in, ready for trouble, and making sure that we develop that paradox. He's thinking for himself, he's listening to us. And then as we get better, it'll all fall into place. Our eye will have developed. And if we want to see strides, we'll see them. And I'm going to close. There's a lot I've got on my bits of paper, but I'm terribly aware that I've banged on quite a bit, and I don't want to. It's already been 22 minutes. There's just a couple of things I want to say. That when you next are late for a train or a plane, if and when we ever fly again, although I have just flown backwards and forwards to Tokyo, which was quite a shock after 18 months of blissful no flying, run to the escalator and feel what you do to get on that escalator without going nose first and falling up the steps. Try it, because instinctively, as you run to that escalator, because you're late, so you haven't got a minute to spare, your feet will go boom, boom, boom before you step on the escalator, otherwise you're going to fall. That is what a horse needs to be able to do. But an awful lot of us don't let him do it. We say, you're going to take off here and jump onto the escalator from here, which can work really well. But sometimes they need that little bit of extra time to rebalance themselves or to see what they're doing. So that's something I often use in my own mind to remind myself. And I'll often go, I do very little running, but I might go for 10 minutes every now and again, and I'll jump the drainage lids on the road or jump a different piece of tarmac, and I'll judge my distance to get to it, to jump it. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what a horse needs to be able to do. He doesn't want me in his way saying, whoa, 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 we haven't on the right stride, whoa, 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 because he wants to be looking at that fence and judging where he's going to take off. And if he makes a mistake, and even horses make way less mistakes than us, but every now and again they will, great. When my horse hits a fence, hopefully I'm not falling off because I'm sitting ready for trouble. I'm thinking to myself, not, oh gosh, how scary. I'm thinking, good, because he's now really going to learn from that. And all of us learn from our mistakes. You do, I do, our horses do. That wonderful Nelson Mandela, if you don't win, you learn. It's very important. There was just one thing that I wanted to come to you with. Put the glasses on a second, hang on. Yes, I think it was really revolving around the feeling that, and I really, really believe this, that horses don't want to fall. And the last time I rode in a serious competition, I had the father and mother of a fall. And it's taken me a long time to work out what happened. But it was an Australian thoroughbred. And from the moment he arrived with me in England, he didn't have a lust to jump. And he had about as a 7-year-old, and I think he came to me at 9, and he'd had foot problems in between time, but they were all fine now. But to cut a long story short, he only ever went on the hard once, and it was at Houghton, and it was when I had this father and mother of a fall off him, and he was such a safe horse and such a generous horse, because his feet were a problem all the way through, and he was brilliantly shod by Hayden Price, whom I trailed up to Wales time and again, helped by several friends. And he had spiderweb shoes on, which are quite heavy. But coming to a fence before the one he fell was a big ox. And I said, oh, come on, for goodness sake, give me a decent jump. And, gave him a bash and come on, because he was hanging back and he landed. And I felt him go, oh, as he landed. The next fence he came into, a treble. He jumped the first element, which is very small, and he was on a beautiful stride for the middle element, and he went straight into it. And I absolutely believe, thank goodness it was on video and I was able to watch it many times, I absolutely believe that he was such a generous horse that he wasn't going to stop, which is pretty amazing, but that it had hurt him landing on his feet the fence before, and he didn't want to have that pain again. And why I believe this is because the next 2 years proved that he had a chronic foot problem. It was manageable up until then, and over the next couple of years, it wasn't any longer manageable. It was a lack of blood supply to the feet. And interestingly, his sire, a thoroughbred called Yoha in America, breeds a lot of horses that don't necessarily race as well as he did, but are very good with amateurs. And I just wonder if there's a congenital weakness through all these horses that means that the circulation to the feet isn't so good, and therefore they're a little bit easy going and don't do big jumps and don't run away and don't buck, because this was this horse. So it happens. We all fall off, whether we want to or not. This was one of the most extraordinary and inexplicable ones I've ever had, but I have a great belief that a horse does not want to fall. And provided you believe that, and I see no reason why not, because horses are such survivors, you will find your way to helping your horse learn to use his initiative. But your body is crucial, not letting that get in front of him, because he cannot take off if your body has weighed onto his front end just when he's got to put in that little short stride and try and get himself back from the fence and out of trouble. So it is very important that you have the body weight sorted. And one of the reasons we started our cross-country academy last October, which is just opened over the last 24 hours and stays open for 8 more days, is because I am so passionate about keeping cross-country as the heartbeat of eventing. And if it doesn't, we're going to be second-rate show jumping, second-rate dressage with an exhibition cross-country. It wasn't like that in the Olympic Games, but it's going that way. And we're not going to get sponsorship for a sport that is second-rate dressage, second-rate show jumping. I mean, I spent 2 weeks in Tokyo watching the very, very best of show jumping and dressage, and it leaves us far behind. But then we are a triathlete. We do a little bit of everything, not just one thing. So I console myself a little with that. But we have to keep cross-country the heartbeat of the sport, and we're only going to do that if we understand a little bit more how to train our horses, which is so much fun. It is so not difficult, but it just needs some basic understanding, which I produce in what I call my green print as opposed to my blueprint. And it needs the rider to understand where his weight should be, how he should allow the horse the ability to see his fences and not have him on a death grip, but he's not allowed to run out. He has to keep his line. And I'll leave you with one little sentence, which is not so much to do with seeing a stride as just generally cross-country riding, which is your job as a cross-country rider is to make sure you keep your horse exactly on the line that you know you want to be on, at exactly the pace that you know you need, but never to interfere with where he needs to put his head and his neck in order to see the fence, might want to have a quick look down at the ditch or the water, or in order to balance when he gets the other side. And that is actually something I try and get people to write in their iPhone because it sort of goes. But it's really, really important that your job is to keep that line, to keep that pace, but never interfere with where he may need to put his head and neck to see or to balance. So I have now talked for what I promised Rachel I wouldn't, 29 minutes. I said I'll never do half an hour. I didn't. I only did 29. But it's enough. And I'm terribly aware that, thank you, Rachel, that people might be going to sleep. But you can always listen to this on your earphones in the car. You don't have to watch this pink blitz on your screen. And Rachel, you've been trying to struggle with doing this thing about which questions are most interesting to people. How are you getting on?
Well, I'm getting on really well. So I also just want to say that you say that every time that people are going to get bored of hearing it from you, and they absolutely are not. And everyone's agreeing with me in the chat. So
I just want to quickly point out to you, because Rachel has become a seriously good mate, because we went in this together just knowing each other a bit. Mm-hmm. She went down lockdown, took a Kajabi course on a membership, said to me in the first lifting of lockdown when I came to Tweedledum with some people to help or play, we call cross-country play, hell with help. And she said, well, what about this? Would you like to do it? I said, well, why not? I can't go abroad, you know. And so we set out doing it, but she has got amazing technical skills. I have none. But I just want you to know that this lady you're looking at rode in the Barcelona Olympics a series, now that was a proper course, in 1992 for Team Canada. She was the first one, I think I'm right in saying, that managed to get onto the roof of this house, which was a fence, and off it down into a water jump. God knows how many feet further down. You had to jump onto the roof, run across it, and down. She was the first one in there, and she's got a wonderful picture at home, you know, of serious cab hailing, because what else can you do when you've got that sort of drop into water? Mm-hmm. And that fence caused serious trouble all day, and most people, including our team, took the longer route because that was proving too difficult. Guess who took the straight route and got it done? So you are on the hands of an expert here.
Not really. And I can actually tell you all that my technical skills have failed me because I have sent you all a very random email. Because my technical field, they have, so please ignore the sort of random email, which was a template that I didn't realize was going out, and I was going to add the link to and edit it. So you've got a random email. So apologies, everybody.
It makes me feel so good that you can cock it up, Rachel. And it's not
I cock it up all the time, though. So she says I'm the technical one. To be fair, I'm incredibly technical compared to Lucinda.
Yeah, that's right.
But not compared to your average.
Questions underway, because
yes. So the good news is we've got some questions, and so Sally Wells has asked one that 17 people have put a thumbs up for, and she says it's not so much seeing the stride, but how do you put your horse more or less on the general spot at cross-country speeds, especially if they are being strong and not adjustable?
Let the fence do it. The fence will make the horse back up and do his right thing, and if it doesn't, it will the next time. That doesn't mean that you have to be brave and run wild into a fence. Your job is speed. If that fence is a double, your job is to get him back to a show jumping speed. You cannot race through a double at cross-country speed. Cross-country speed is a fair old moving on canter gallop. So you have to come back to show jumping speed. He's strong, he fights you. Your job is to get him back in time, and you may have to be very strong, but don't forget, when you get a horse back with your hands, your legs must be around him. He must be what I call in the tube, so that you've got his eyes on the fence through your legs, you've got his balance. And if he's a real fighter, your job is to bring him back and have all the fighting when he can't possibly see the fence because his head is so high, early enough that then you can say, right, there's the fence, take me to it. And then he might rush to it in those last 2 or 3 strides, but at least he's been rebalanced from his cross-country gallop. He's in the balance. Even if he rushes to the fence, then that will back him off. Occasionally there are horses that are just a bit stupid, and sometimes they've been made stupid by a rider that's rushed them. But what I need, whoever asked that question, what was the name, Rachel?
Oh, that was Sally Wells.
Sorry to do that to you. Sally, you don't have to put him on the approximate spot. You're not in charge of how that horse takes off. It's his legs. All 4 of them are his. And if you go and run and jump yourself and you don't bother to see your stride, you'll hit that fence and you'll go, oh, God, I'm not going to do that again. Your horse is exactly the same. But you have got the elbow. That is your job. Those 3 jobs, engine, line, balance. And those are encompassed. What you're having, this feeling that he's a bit strong, are encompassed. You'll sort that out if you can get your elbow sorted. You don't have to worry about getting him on the right spot. He will do that for himself once he has understood the speed that you want him in, but most primarily before the speed you want him in, that is the fence. And these days, with 5 fences in front of you as you come around a corner, 5 different levels, and you know you're doing third from the left, and he comes around the corner and goes second from the left, and oh my goodness, as you get near it, you suddenly realize he's actually cottoned on to the intermediate and you're still in the novice or the pre-novice. Bloody scary, let me tell you. But you're late because you should have realized as he came around the corner that he wasn't on your fence, that he was on the one next door. Then you're going to have to yank him up and pull him off, and he'll probably stop at your fence because he's so discombobulated by what you've done. But he'll see that fence and he'll go for it, and you've got to make sure he goes for the right one. It's quite difficult these days with so many fences. It just practice over small fences. They won't jump them very well because there's nothing to back them off. But just go out and just sit there, keep your legs round, and canter ploppity ploppity plop over a few small fences, 2'6", whatever. And he, as I say, won't give you a great feel unless he's a real baby, in which case you want to do it over much lower because they're not big enough to back him up. But just feel how he judges for himself. And if he doesn't, and he just goes in a bit deep and hits it because you're sitting so well, you're not going to move, he won't do it to the next one. Every now and again, you get horses that have gone in their heads, and sometimes they've gone because something's really hurting or their saddle is really hurting, and sometimes they don't see well. There's a lot of little things around the edge that can become crucial in you not being able to do what I'd like you to do. So you do have to keep an eye lateral as to what could be wrong. It's not always straightforward.
Okay, so I have another question, but I just wanted to say something because Lucinda said this to me the other day. And so if your horse is on the bit, it's very unlikely that he can see the fence. And I found that out by just walking along on the bit over a 1-foot log at walk, and my horse just completely fell over it and I thought back and I thought, well, I know exactly why that is because I had him on the bit and he didn't even see it. So this whole making sure that they can see the fence, to me, it's stupidly, because I have ridden to a decent level, it doesn't come instinctively. It's crazy. So you need to be thinking about it.
Rachel, you hit on such a good point, which although we're not meant to be talking about how you do things, I said at the beginning, is inevitably going to turn into that. Something that is well misunderstood, and I only learned it myself a decade ago in America, reading about Red Indians who were brilliant horsemen. This is how brilliant a Red Indian horseman is. He could get his horse, train it to lie down, cover it with sand, go and hide behind a tree, and the US cavalry would gallop straight by, and they'd never know they'd just gone past the Red Indians that they were chasing. That was their brilliant horsemanship. And they were the ones that said a horse sees distance out of the bottom half of his eye. So if he's coming into a fence, he needs to be up off the bit. If he's on the bit, he can only see down onto the ground. And he sees close vision. His close vision is the top half of his eye. So he needs, when he suddenly sees a ditch or a strange color on the ground or the grass changes or something, just have a glance at that. And sometimes when you're coming into a ditch, they throw their head right down. They go through literally 180 degrees. And you've got to maintain your ready for trouble position, allow your fingers to let those reins go so that he can look, but he's not allowed to leave his line. And that's where you have to be so clever. But Rachel, you couldn't have brought up a better point. How a horse sees. On the bit, he doesn't see. He just sees what's in front of him. Very good point. Thank you.
Okay, so Patty, 24 people have thumbs up this question. How do we create the engine without going flat, but still staying soft in the reins the horse may choose?
Every horse is different. Riding is it's a fascinating art, and there's science in it too. And some horses need much more holding together than others. Others, you can get them in balance and get their engine and just have a lovely contact. Others, you have to really have a grip. And if you watch, and I hope you can do this, go back onto the Olympic channel that you might not have, I have, and watch one of the most brilliant riders I've ever seen show jumping, Peter Fredriksson, who won the silver medal in Rio. The same horse 5 years later won the silver medal in Tokyo. Watch him coming into a fence, and he's got big hands, so you can see. And that little horse is in I think a white pelham, a Happy Miles soft anyhow, a white pelham, and he's like this. in those last 2 or 3 strides, because that's what brings that horse together. He's got those lovely legs and he's wrapped around him properly good, but he dig, 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 dig. So there's no set pattern about how you create that power. You've been taught to have soft hands. I couldn't agree more. My fingers are always ready to allow the horse to take the rein when he needs to look or to balance himself. But when I want him to come together and bundle him into a jumping balance, even if I'm going fast, I might have to be quite firm. And I've had horses like Peter's horse when I have to be really firm. And I had horses like maybe yours when I just have to be holding the velvet cushion. There's so many different contacts. And Nuno de Oliveira was an amazing classical dressage artist who didn't really enjoy competing because he didn't like the way people trained who competed. So he just went off to Portugal and did his own high school of his own horses and went over and taught other people. But he came out of competition for that reason. And he said, good hands is having the ability to have fingers that can go from concrete to feathers in a split second. Good hands is having fingers that can go from concrete to feathers in a split second. That is, I think, where you need to be thinking about how I'm going to get my horse together. There's no set pattern. Every horse is different. In the end, you want your horse to carry himself, but he'll carry himself on a contact, because your contact is a direct link to his brain. And if you have a loose rein, you haven't got a brain. If any of you have ever ridden a horse in a bit he really hates, you haven't got a connection with his brain. So you find a bit that he likes, and then you've got a link to his brain. And sometimes you never find one they really like, but if you can get 80%, you'll be okay. Right.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I'm worried I'm making my answers too long, Rachel.
Well, no, we've still got 20 minutes, so we're good. We're good. We'll get through as many as we can. But yeah, I mean, it's gold. All of this is gold. So I'm looking forward to you answering this one. This is Rhiannon's, I think. I don't, hopefully that's how you say your name. With a young horse, how do I help him onto the correct stride without running too much of his ability? Ruining too much of his ability to think for himself. So she's saying that
how many people have ticked that question?
17.
Just repeat it.
So with a young horse, how do I help him onto the correct stride without ruining too much of his ability to think for himself? Now, before you say anything, can I just say, I think Rhiannon's maybe typed this before, at the very beginning, before you said all of that.
Well, I'm terribly glad, because then I won't give you a bollocking. Because what I was going to say was 17 if you haven't listened. Because you don't need to help him at all. What your job is, elbow. You've got to help him see that fence, take you to it, and then regulate that take with your body in that ready for trouble position, your legs wrapped around him, not hard, soft, but ready to be hard if you have to be. And he will find his spot. This is so fascinating that you say this, and you are one of most of the population. Most of the population think it's their responsibility to get their horse near enough to the right spot. I'm saying to you, it isn't. It's your horse's responsibility to get you over that fence. So he chooses where he wants to do it from. But you have to do your job. You cannot expect him to do it without. It's a continuous intrigue, actually. And I often set people off, just say 2 things. Make sure he sees it early, make sure he takes you to it, then regulate that take. We never, ever get into striding troubles. It just happens. The horses just get it. Try it.
Can I just say something here? So exactly what Lucinda has just said is why I wanted her to do this academy, because most riders, myself included, when you're producing a young horse, you feel so much responsibility to do it right that you do it wrong. And so I noticed with the way Lucinda, she taught loads to my daughter on her big horse, but we learnt the most when she helped us with her baby horse and said, what are you doing? Stop cantering to everything. Just come back. And, trot jumping, walk jumping, everything was at slow pace. And that's how we developed, Lucinda, I actually sort of said to her, you've got some fundamental, what are your fundamental trainings? No, I don't have those. I just teach everybody. But actually she does. And that's the green print. It's all of that stuff that you do at home. And that's the magic. And that's the thing that I desperately want everybody to have access to. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. How do I keep, sorry, so hang on a minute. Okay, so Julia is asking, how do I keep the medium canter on a green horse who's a bit lacking in confidence? The air can come right out of the sails, a stride or two out, and poof, the distance is gone. 17 people have asked that.
He may not be ready to canter yet. You may be needing to do a lot more in trot, but when you do, I have a little sort of sequence. The first time my horse goes cross country, it's over fences that are, I can't do metric, 30 centimeters a foot, and he walks them. And he walks up and he huffs and he puffs, but he steps over, or he does a huge jump, and I'm left all over the place trying not to pull him in the mouth in order to stay on. And he just does that. And I find a cross country venue that has little tiny baby jumps, and then he'll trot the same jumps, and some of them he'll step over because they're not big enough, others he'll jump, and I'm slow. I had one yesterday, a very, very nice young horse. It was his second cross country. We'd done his first one a week or two ago, and he kept skyscrapering, just sort of jumping huge as if he was going to the top of a skyscraper and down. How the girl stayed on him, I'll never know, but she did. And I said, can you just slow down? Just rise slower. Don't pull him in the mouth. Just rise slower and get everything lazy. And then he stopped skyscrapering, because in her natural design, not to let him stop, because I always say to everybody, your horse must never learn there's an option to run out. He must never learn there's an option to refuse. So with that, they have a bit more than they need for 1 foot high, baby fence, baby horse. And he was quite happy to come in. Some aren't, so you have to say, oh, come on, it was such a wimp, take me in. And I have to use a bit of leg, but this one didn't need any. And she was actually letting him go too fast. And he then they didn't know what to do. So he skyscrapered miles into the air. Soon as she slowed him down into what I call lazy trot, by slowing her rising and just make everything lazy, he started to jump normally. And then we did just the same fences in canter. And he was just gagging for it. Ba-boom, ba-boom, jump, ba-boom, ba-boom, jump, because he knew all those fences. He'd done them in walk, he'd done them in trot. So I didn't have any problems with him. And then we went down to a couple of slightly bigger, maybe 2'6" instead of 2'3", or 2 foot instead of 1'6", whatever. And he hadn't seen them before, and he was huffing and puffing because one was a brush and he'd never seen a brush. And I said, it didn't matter, just trot him to it. And he went in, and she just sat behind him and just encouraged him, because when they're going, oh, they're actually asking you a question. They're saying, oh, what is this? And your job is to answer the question. It's very rude not to answer a question. So when a horse goes, what is it? You're saying, it's okay, you can do it. I don't mind if you're walking it, but we're going the other side and you're going before I go. And then within 2 seconds, he was cantering both ways of it. And then he went round and jumped a fence out of canter he'd never seen before, which was a log with 2 green bushes in front of it. Quite scary. And 4 strides out, he sank back and he asked the question. And the good girl on top just said, it's all right, you can do it. And he said, okay, I can. And he did the most beautiful jump, which we had on a picture, and we stopped. That was his lesson for the day. You shouldn't get into the problems that we get into. And we often get into them because we're taking on somebody else's problems. And then it becomes a whole different ballgame trying to retrain a horse that's already maybe got a bit nervous, or a bit, I know I can stop, I know I don't have to go. So there's a lot of problems. It's much simpler to do it yourself.
Oh, brilliant. Back to basics. Back to basics. And I think you've just answered Julia Spriggett's question, which is, what's the best way to cope with a horse that doesn't take you to the fence? Do you think it's much harder?
You need a polo whip, and you need to carry a long whip with a horse that's a bit spooky and doesn't go. And I wouldn't mind if you carried one in each hand. And I say polo whip because they are stiff. Imagine playing polo. You have 4 reins in one hand and a stick, and you've got to go from 0 to 30 in a split second. You can't afford a swishy dressage whip because it won't make contact straight away. So I'll always use a polo whip, and it's what I call a clacker. You just get clack, clack on their bottom, There's no way I'm beating him up. Doesn't need that. Where did that come from? That's another pair of legs on my backside that I wasn't expecting. And they'll take you in. But I don't want them galloping in. I just want them to take me in. And you're absolutely right. Lots of horses are spooky, shy, you know, smoke's coming out of their nostrils. That's why my fences are so small to start with. And why whenever I'm hacking, I will try and go off piste and try and find dodgy bits of ground to help him learn to walk up and down. But it is up to me to make sure they're safe, because I want my horse to learn to trust me that wherever I say go, because it's all right. So if I end up going through a bit of undergrowth and there's a great chasm in it and I didn't know it was there and he falls in it, he's never going to trust me. So be careful about off piste. You need to be sure it's safe.
Okay, Kirsty, I think is how we say this name. Horace. I wonder where you're from, Kirsty. Tell us in the chat. Somewhat related to what spot you get when you bring your horse back from its gallop to prepare for a combination. How can you tell if you have the right canter, engine with balance impulsion in brackets, versus your horse just slowing down and isn't really connected?
It's a really good question. And what you've got to feel is that he's taking you. Even if you've had to slow him right down to something way slower than you've been doing between fences, you must feel he's taking you. And if he isn't, you haven't got your leg on. And some horses take you without you doing more than just cuddling. Some horses, when you slow them down, they drop behind your leg. It's all, I'm afraid, and I'm the world's worst dressage rider and hate it because I am bad at it. You don't like things you aren't good at. But it's all basic training. When you bring a horse back, he doesn't go behind your leg. He stays wanting to go forward. It is all basic. Dressage, as you all know, means training. It's just a French word for training. So he'll come back, you'll try and keep him in front of your leg. He'll say, I've never seen a fence that's black and white before in my life. And he'll try and stop absolutely dead. And hopefully you aren't at an event, because hopefully you've got him through some of that in your training. And at that point, my polo whip will go, tack, tack, just bloody well take me, June. I don't mind if he trots like a dragon on fire to it, because it's not going to be so big that he can't jump it out of trot. All these things that we're talking about happen with nearly every young horse, which is why you don't want to be facing fences that you can't trot at. If they're too big and you need to canter, you're probably going to end up in trouble. So I don't mind how much my horse spooks and sees dragons. He's going, and he's going first time. It doesn't matter how badly he jumps it. Doesn't matter where he leaves me. I'm going to try and use my balance to roughly stay with him. Then I'm going to pick him up and continue on either in trot or in canter, whatever level he's got to. And then I'm going to say, you see that fence over there? That's the next one that you're going to be terrified about. Take me to it. Oh, no, I can't. And clack, clack with my stick. Come on. I don't mind if you've broken into trot, but stay wanting the fence, even though you don't know what it is and you're like this. I promise you it works. It doesn't happen overnight, but it works. The confidence increases, not just in you, but in themselves. You're trying to help a horse believe in himself. And when a horse stops or runs out, or you and me fall off, that in itself undermines his confidence. The very act of stopping or running out, or you plop, he gets a fright. And it's taken me a long, long time to realize this, that it's not just us that get a fright or get cross with ourselves. He gets a fright. So we have to doubly hold his hand when we come back to jump it again.
Okay, brilliant. We've still got lots of questions, but I don't think we're going to have time to get to all of them. I've got two quick ones for you, Lucinda. Alyssa says, would you rather a deeper spot or a longer spot?
It's a very good question. A deeper spot any day. Why? Because a longer one could mean that they'll put in again, and you might have already gone by the time you thought they were going to take off. And that's a really important thing. Never think when they're going to take off, because as soon as you do that, you'll think he's going to go, you'll go, he puts in another one, and now you're in front of the vertical, you're on his shoulders, and he can't put in his short one safely, bring his feet up. But any day I would rather a short one. But I'm not the horse, and some horses prefer the longer spot, and some horses right the way up to badminton will just gallop into the bottom and pop out. Others will just come off a longer spot or a normal spot. Horses very much tell you that.
Brilliant. And Tara Kelly wants to know, do you think hunting can help an eventer?
You know who it really helps is the event rider. because you have to learn to just get over the flipping fence. And just teaching it only yesterday, I had a couple of people jumping a really tricky, that high log on prelim horses, novice horses, horses that knew their stuff. But that high log was on top of a conical bank about 12 feet high. And because they go up the bank, see the log on top and can't see where they're landing because they're landing down the bank, they'll very often stop. And I love putting people over it. And bottom line is, you must want to get it over the other side of that fence so much that no matter how imprecise it is, and no matter how much what I call hunting riding you have to do, you're getting the other side and the horse is going before you do. It's all very well to get the other side without your horse. That's no good. So I think sometimes we spend so much time worrying about how to do it well, we actually forget what I had in spades as a young person before anybody taught me anything, was utter misery if I didn't get the other side first time. I felt such a fool. How did I let that happen? I always blame myself and just kick hard or whatever it was. So that's something, I think that's a very good, although I think we still have a few minutes, Rachel. That's a very good closing one to just remember the bottom line is get the other side of the fence no matter what.
I actually have just seen one question that Vicky May Northover has asked, which I have to ask you. We've had this conversation before. Do you look at the top of the fence or do you look past it?
No idea. I have no idea, but I'll always find a line for a difficult fence particularly. I'll always have a tree over there. Please make sure it's not something that can move, like a car or a low fence post, because somebody can stand in front of that fence post and you can't see it, and then you've lost your whole line through that combination. But I don't know where I look. I keep meaning to try and remember to look. I think I look at the fence, the top of it, definitely not the bottom. And if I've got another one nearby, I'm on to that other one as soon as I feel my horse lock on to the one in front of him, unless the one in front of me is a skinny. And then if I look to the next one, he could easily run out from the skinny, because horses feel where you're looking. So I have to be careful that if there's a skinny, if the fence I'm coming to is a skinny, I stare out the tree the other side or whatever it is, but I'll probably look at the top of the fence. And then as I'm between the flags, I'm looking to the next one. But it's a very good question, and I don't think it matters. I think you look where you want to look. But there's something to be said for chin up, because it then puts you into your plugged in seat. So there's something to be said for looking up and beyond rather than into the bottom. Certainly don't look into that ditch.
Ros Canter, she said that her riding transformed when she started looking beyond. That's when she started getting up the level. So I think it's definitely a personal choice, isn't it?
I love that, because I think if you look beyond, you don't fuss about the stride in front.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Ros Canter, we serve for our Olympic team, may easily end up being European champion, is world champion, and is one of the most talented cross-country riders. And again, the wonderful thing about being a little bit older is you've had so much fun watching people come through. And Ros was, I never knew her when she wasn't very experienced, but I've just watched her get better and better and better. But I've also watched some seriously rubbish riders go from rubbish through maybe 20 or 30 years to Olympic gold medalists. And that's the fun of having been around so long, because anybody can do it, but you've got to have a hell of an attitude. You've got to be able to take knock after knock after knock. And you guys know what I mean if you've got horses. It's, I reckon, one out of 10 good, 9 out of 10 bad. So you've got to be quite an optimist.
Oh. Okay. So guys, sorry, I think we'll have to leave these other questions for another day. But thank you, Lucinda. I just wanted to just let you all know that Lucinda has her Lucinda Green Cross Country Academy, and it's now open for new members. And it's open until next Tuesday for 6 days. And basically this is what you get each month. You get Lucinda sitting here telling you this incredible stuff, which helps so much. And then on top of that, you get the green print, which is the magic. It's the training, the stuff that you do at home. And I know that our members that have been with us now since November, and then some joined in February, they've been going through the green print, and they're out and they're doing so well loads of them getting clear rounds cross country when they've never gone clear before. Lots of them, a couple of them have upgraded and they're off on their first 3 stars. So we've got all different levels. So I'm doing a bit of a sales pitch here. Lucinda hates selling, but I find it so easy because she's so amazing. And I really genuinely think she's doing a disservice if she doesn't teach people this stuff. So I really hope that some of you guys fancy joining us on this really fun membership. It's really good fun. We all have a great time. The community is amazing, supporting one another in the Facebook group and in the community on the hub. You get your video learnings, you get Q&As with Lucinda, just like tonight. And you also get these incredible insider infos with amazing people like Chris Bartle and Laura Collette and Sam Watson and William Foxbit. I mean, loads of amazing people. So I'm going to send you all an email with a link, and then fingers crossed, some of you guys are going to click that link and sign up. We would absolutely love to see you in there. Lucinda, have you got any parting words?
No, I said them all. I said them all, but it's Rachel's passion. It's my passion to keep cross country as the heartbeat of the sport. And I tell you guys out there, and there may even be as many as 2,000 of you, we've got work to do, because we have got it. We're up against it with the attitude that people now have. And do we have a right to ask our horses to compete? That is what's beginning to come our way. So we've got to learn the very best way that we can to help our horses love cross country. There's no way I'm riding a horse that doesn't love it, but it's up to us to help him learn to love it. So good luck, go for it.
Okay, if anybody has any questions about the academy, then now's your chance to ask. And we'll hang on in here for a few more minutes. And gosh,
should we stop record now then?
We can stop recording. Yeah, should we stop recording? Yeah,
because you always get me to remind you. But
okay, I'll stop recording. So I am going to send this out to you all.